with the Intra African Trade Fair, we'll begin to bring down the borders that divide us. Historically, colonialism had meant that African countries traded more with their metropolitan power than among themselves. And because they related more with outsiders than within the continent, there was no trade information and no trade. So Africa reports the lowest intra-regional trade as a percentage of total trade in the world compared to other regions. And unless you trade with yourself, you're not going to gain a dynamic comparative advantage to be able to be more competitive globally. It is no wonder that Africa is in the periphery of global trade. Africa's share of world trade is 3%. It's because it has not grown its own internal trade. It cannot compete outside. So with the Intra-African Trade Fair, we begin to create opportunity for businesses to get acquainted, to know themselves, governments to expose the opportunities in their countries to other African businesses, and also for us to learn more about our culture, the creative assets we have across our continent, and also to expose the youth to the opportunities. So as they then rise and grow in the different callings that they have, they will begin to carry the mantle, having removed the problem that history has foisted on us. So it is a very important event that we're going to have. And we have so many verticals. We have the Creative Africa Nexus, which will showcase the creative industry, creative and cultural industry, not only in geographic Africa, but the global Africa, including Africans in the diaspora. We have the automotive show. And gradually, we are now making an African automotive show an important element of the Intra-African Trade Fair. The first one was held during the second trade fair in Durban in 2021. We are doing the second one. Yeah.
The 2023 Intra Africa Trade Fair promises to be packed with activity. The IATF is an initiative organized by Afreximbank in collaboration with the African Union and the AFCFTA Secretariat. The goal is to support the implementation of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area by addressing the gaps in trade and market information. I'm Kenneth Igbomo, and I'll take you through some key moments at the 2023 Intra Africa Trade Fair in Cairo. All roads lead to Cairo in Egypt for the 2023 Intra Africa Trade Fair at the Egypt International Exhibition Center and the Al Manara International Conference Center. With over 35,000 visitors and 1,600 exhibitors expected this year, this opens the potential for more trade and investment deals in Africa. Let's hear from the other key stakeholders of the trade fair.
We had the first Intra Africa the idea in the Cairo. And then the second one in Durban, the Cairo back is here in Cairo. And why do we get together? Just bring together close to 10,000 listers, about 1,600, 1,200 buyers and sellers. And they make it transactions, especially the buyers and sellers. In 2018, the transactions were predicted at $5 billion US dollars. We got about 32 million. 2021, we got 2 billion. This time around, we are estimating that we're going to do business-to-business transaction for $3 billion. Now, within those, the transactions. There are also long-term and medium-term supply contracts which are signed. A buyer will say, I'll need you to supply, as an example, so much coffee in the next 5 years, so much washing powder or another product. And on the basis of that, a producer can expand production. So when you have the Intra African Trade Fair, it's a mechanism for bringing out information through product performance or what is available. It's also a mechanism for stimulating investments through trade and investment deals. So that's very, very important.
Well, the deals that were signed here are private sector focused, how the AFCFTA can benefit the private sector. It is a platform, the Intra Africa Trade Fair is the right platform for business connectivity, for trade transactions to be concluded, so that in 2 years' time, when we reconvene at another trade fair, we can assess the implementation of these memorandums of understanding that were signed today for boosting intra-Africa trade.
He also spoke about the progress of the Guided Trade Initiative.
We started the Guided Trade Initiative last year. It was 8 countries. Those countries were ready to trade under the rules of the AFCFTA. In other words, those countries had domesticated all of the legal instruments at national level that are required for import or export under the AFCFTA. The products that were traded ranged. There were 96 products, manufactured products, manufactured goods, agricultural products. It was a range of products traded, and what was covered is the length and breadth of the continent. So goods moved from Kenya to Ghana, from Ghana to Cameroon, from Egypt to West Africa. So all of the regions of the African continent were covered, and the lesson learned is something that, of course, we already had a reasonable assumption about, and that is that the private sector is well geared to benefit from the AFCFTA, and that the private sector wants to see accelerated implementation of the AFCFTA. So, for example, the importer of ceramic tiles in Cameroon that were coming from Ghana received a 20% duty reduction as a result of the preferences of the AFCFTA. Tanzanian smallholder farmer who exported his products under AFCFTA received a 30% reduction in duty. So these are the benefits to the private sector.
For regional trade to work, cross-border payment challenges have to be addressed if Africa will achieve higher volumes of intra-Africa trade. The Pan-African Payment Settlement System was set up to fit this purpose. So what's the update on its implementation?
For PAPS, it's a journey. We've made significant progress. Today we have 11 central banks, about 82 commercial banks, and we also have 9 national switches and a number of other stakeholders who are connected to this platform. Today we are doing real-time instant payments, across a number of countries in Africa, and we intend to expand this even much further. We've gone ahead to work with some of the largest commercial banks, working with the likes of Standard Bank, UBA, EcoBank, Access Bank, and KCB. And what that does is we're working with them to accelerate the rollout of PAPS across many more countries. So we are satisfied with the progress that we have made. We're beginning to see real life value, because when you talk payments is not just for the sake of
putting a technology in place, but the real life impacts that we're able to achieve. So we're beginning to see small SMEs who have actually utilized PAPs actually to save them time in making their payments, and therefore they have much more time to turn around their inventories. We're looking at the entire ecosystem. Again, when you think about PAPs, think more of an ecosystem, okay? Now we have connected into central banks and their RTGS systems. Now we've connected into commercial banks and their core banking systems. Now we have connected into switches and their systems. So what that does, just having all these ecosystem members together, is creating an innovation layer. That means that a small tech provider, a small country like Seychelles, or a small country, anywhere on the African continent, is able to create a solution and be able to target 1.4 billion people and not worry about how he settles the transaction, because PAPs will cover that.
The Intra Africa Trade Fair had many side events around the trade fair premises: the IATF Trade and Investment Conference, the Creative Africa Nexus, and the Automotive Show as some of the flagship events happening across the venues. These initiatives are geared towards improving trade information in Africa.
Yes, the IATF is critical and very important, but for Africa to be integrated, for Africa to be united, for Africa to make sure that it's prosperous, we need people, and people need to connect. People have to bring their talents, their goods, their services, but also their capacities, including intellectual capacities, and be together to discuss the Africa they want. And the IATF, although based on trade facilitation, gives the opportunity, because behind trade, in order to trade, you need to expand the market. In order to expand the market, there is the conducive environment that you require. In order to have a conducive environment, there are people that are required. The human capital development is critical and very important. So everything is intertwined. The ecosystem should be put in place for trade to happen and for AFCFTA to be realized. And therefore, people getting together with the same objective, shared vision, a shared responsibility, sharing their views, understanding the problems, challenges, and coming out with a homegrown solution is critical and very important. This platform is, for me, the most important platform that we have in Africa.
I think, let me start first of all with the fact that the Intra African Trade Fair is in its third iteration, and each one has become better and better. Why a fair like this is important is simply because one of the first and most major decisions of the AFCFTA is how do you increase intra-African trade? And the need to increase intra-African trade is so critical, because that is what will determine the competitiveness of the entire continent outside. There was a decision by the AU heads to have intra-African trade reach 50% by 2035. That is what, 12 years from now. The fact is, currently, intra-African trade is at 14 to 16%. It is the lowest in the world for all regions. And why is that? Because of, besides logistics, transportation issues, also issues having to do with the issues of customs, non-tariff measures, taxation, all the various elements that make it difficult to actually do trade within Africa. The other issue is the historical precedent. There has been a historical situation where there's the metropole and all roads lead to the metropole. Yeah. So if you were French, you went to Paris. If you were London, you went to London. You know how it is. And so trying to undo and remove that process of trade has to be done as well within Africa, so that Africa sees itself as the first choice, not the last.
Well, you cannot talk about trade in Africa without bringing in the creative sector. African culture, literature, movies, sports, fashion, art, food and music all tell the continent's unique story. Canex brings it all to life.
Here to celebrate the opening of the Creative Africa Nexus Summit under the theme, One People, United in Culture, Creating for the World. This momentous occasion marks another chapter in the journey of African creativity, innovation, and collaboration. Thank you. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, you will agree with me that Africa is a continent without any doubt that is brimming with artistic brilliance, vibrant cultures, and untold stories. From the shimmering Saharan sunsets to the rhythmic beats of vibrant cities, there is a rich tapestry of inspiration waiting to be weaved into masterpieces that will captivate the world. As we're gathered in our Manara in these coming days, we have an opportunity to harness this creative potential and showcase the immense talent that lies within our extended borders as global Africa. Africa and its diaspora is on the rise in all facets of the creative and cultural industries, including film and audiovisual, music, arts and crafts, sports, fashion, and even culinary arts. UNESCO estimates that globally, cultural and creative industries generate around $2.25 trillion annually and employ 30 million people worldwide. Even though Africa represents only 1% of this output. Over the past 5 to 10 years, we have witnessed green shoots of growth indicative of Africa's rise in the global creative ecosystem.
I think Canex, I'm really genuinely excited about Canex because I think that there's so much that we lack. I mean, we don't lack in talent, but we lack in so many other things on this continent. You know, infrastructure and just all kinds of structures. And so for me, I think Canex represents the hope that some of those needs will be met. I think that with Canex, in the next 10 years, we're going to have many more stories, a greater diversity of stories, and also a more efficient and effective strategy for getting stories out there. So I think in general, people don't create because they want to win prizes. Right? People create because they have passion. But prizes are good because they bring the product to the public. And so I think this prize will shine a light on African publishers. And I think also kind of act as a catalyst to propel them to become better. Because I think, it's wonderful, of course, to be published in different parts of the world, but it's, I think, almost imperative, that idea that African writers should be published by African publishers on the continent.
I think the potential in terms of creating content on the continent is huge. The key is to figure out how to implement certain regulations that allow us to offer tax incentive packages to productions from the diaspora. Productions from Europe, from America, because without that, it's almost impossible to generate enough business and to build a real industry. And I think that's a challenge that we have to address across sectors. The fact that some of those financial architectures, some of those structures have to be in place for us to be able to invest here without having to fear that the money disappears every time somebody new gets elected. So again, it's important that we stress to the governing bodies and regulatory departments that implementing tax incentives is the key to establishing a film industry here on the continent.
Trade and investment deals worth about $43.7 billion were sealed at the third edition of the Intra Africa Trade Fair in Egypt, slightly higher than initial projections.
Everybody who came here, every business that came here, came within the framework of the objective for introducing the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. That is to promote trade and investment amongst African countries. So the agreement we will be announcing in the next few days will be covering a number of broad areas. One of them will be the trade contracts that have been signed, contracts between one country and the other, either at the governmental level or at the business level. So what would that mean? It means that it will create an opportunity for new intra-African trade to be created. So that is additionality that the trade fair brings, because it will have provided opportunity for that trade deal to be concluded. And if we take what happened in the past as examples, we've seen where those trade relationships blossomed into something that became bigger and bigger, and even led to intra-African investments. The second thing that are recorded in the deals that are reported are intra-African investments. So where an entity in Africa investing in another African country. This normally happens because amongst the exhibitors are governments and also big industries or manufacturers. So there they look for either partners to work with them or those to come and take advantage of infrastructure investment opportunities. And some companies look out for equity investors. So you see those intra-African investments. What does this mean? When you have intra-African investments, you create a platform for long-term sustainable intra-regional relationships in trade and future investment.
After a rigorous review of bids by the Advisory Council of the Intra Africa Trade Fair, the chairman of the council, Chief Olusegun Obasanjo, announced Algeria as the host of the 4th Intra Africa Trade Fair, which will take place in 2025.
As far as IATF is concerned, the end of one is the beginning of another. I want to explain that we had very rigorous competition, and we examined everything that we should examine. And at the end of the day, Algeria came top.
The Intra Africa Trade Fair is one of the many initiatives by Afreximbank to improve the volume of trade on the continent. We're seeing many exhibitors from across Africa come to ply their wares, from Nigeria, from Kenya, from Ghana, all exposed to new markets, small businesses, bigger businesses, all meeting new clients and striking deals at this year's Intra Africa Trade Fair. And that's all we can take from this episode of Focus On. I'm Kenneth Ibomo. Enjoy the rest of your day.